we're at the stage where we just finished talking about your and you were coming back from San Francisco for a trip back. And what year was that? Can you remember? Is it?
Yes, that was 1957. It was the December 1957.
Okay.
And so I returned home. The ship landed in Auckland, and I remember that Dad and Barry, I'm not sure whether it was David, but Barry anyway, met me there, and we travelled down the island by car to Wellington, and I had a couple of weeks in Wellington before I started work in Wellington with the Ministry of Works again. I'd been on leave from the Ministry of Works for 2.5 years, and I was under a bond to work for, I think, another 3.5 years to make up the 5 years' works since I left university, in exchange for my having received a bursary while I was at the university, and that was fine because it was pretty good work, and there were quite at least half of the people in our year in civil engineering were under this cadetship scheme with the Ministry of Work.
Before we get on to that, what did it feel like to be back in New Zealand after all that?
Yeah.
How long were you away for?
I was away for 2.5 years, and then came down at Christmas time, and Nana and Grandpop had a beach house at Waikanae, which you probably remember, yeah. And had Christmas there. I had 2 or 3 weeks there, and it was really not bad weather, and I thought how wonderful it is with these wonderful beaches and the wonderful ocean and the lovely weather and the beautiful hills and the green country. I really thought that of all the places in the world that I'd seen, this is the best looking place as far as I was concerned to live.
No feeling of anticlimax?
Oh no, not at all, no.
Oh,
I think, no, there's no need to, because I was coming back, and I had plenty to do. I decided that I would do, I'd keep myself busy, and so I had this job. I had a 2-year stint with the Ministry of Works. They had a general design office which designed all their works except structural building work and hydroelectric design. So they just did everything.
Sorry, apologies, I was just thinking of something else at that stage. That they did all the design work except...
This general design office did all the design office except the design work, except that there was a special design office set aside for the very large power schemes that were being built then. So much that they had a special design office, and another one to service all the government buildings and those sorts of commercial buildings.
So which one did you work in?
I worked in the general design office, the thing. So I worked on, from the first year I worked on design of, basically design of a bridge with some bits and pieces added onto it. And the second year I...
where was that bridge?
Oh, well, the bridge is the Mohaka. It's a highway bridge over the Mohaka River between Napier and Taupo.
That's right.
And it's... I've never actually driven over it. I've walked over it because I was there for the opening, which all I did was walk over, and it's a large steel truss bridge, and a truss bridge is one that well, the Sydney Harbour Bridge is a steel truss, but it's a steel truss arch, and this is a bridge. There's the road deck, and then the V-shaped bits underneath hold it up in the form of steel truss. And it's quite big. It's quite high. The piers, piers are about 35 metres high, the tallest pier, and they had to have a special design done because they were there's the potential there for in the future for the hydro scheme being built on the Mohaka River, and then they would be flooded, and then what does that do? How do you do? how you can design a thing for being hit by an earthquake while it's in the fresh air, but what difference does it do to have it um, hit by an earthquake while it's sticking up through a reservoir? And as a matter of fact, most people hadn't thought about it and didn't really know. Unfortunately, I found an article somewhere in an American magazine, engineering paper, and so I was able to design this thing to do that. And I ended up, Grandpop used to encourage me greatly to do things like this. Said you should write a paper on the seismic effects of bridges, piers, when they're submerged in a reservoir. So I did that, and in fact, about 4 years later, I got an award for it. Once every year, they gave an award for a paper to do with the forces of water and
Who's they?
the Institution of Engineers. So they used to have an annual conference. And I gave this paper because Grandpop was saying, well, why don't you do it? Why don't you do it? So I did it. And nothing happened. And then 5 years later, I got it. And apparently what they do is they give it for the best paper that hasn't already had a paper in the last 5 years.
Hasn't already had a prize?
Yeah, hasn't already had this prize.
Yes.
So they obviously, I didn't get it. It took the 5 years, so I got that. So that's my one claim to fame in design work. And the second year I worked in this same design office. I did bridges, but it did all sorts of things, airport runways. I did a little bit on Nandi runway, but documents for construction of it, but pretty minor stuff, and some pretty minor stuff then over a year on sewage and water treatment work, but enough to sort of get a feel for what that's all about. But wasn't a very commercially driven organisation in many parts the industry works, so I didn't get into very much stuff in depth. So that was that first 2 years, and in those first 2 years I
Just hold on one moment, Pete, and I'll just close the door as we talk, so I can hear a bit of noise coming through. Not very professional filmmaking, but you get that. Okay. So let's check your. Look at the proper way. You were saying, sorry.
No, that's right. So I had these first 2 years, and I did this work, and then I said one of the things I was going to do was to make sure that I filmed it. The obvious way to keep yourself involved, as you know, is to make your life a reasonably full life, is try and do as many things as you can. So I'd come to realise that it's a good idea to know something about commercial aspects of life as well as the engineering aspects. So I did, in those days, if you did law or engineering, the students didn't go full-time, they went part-time. They worked in law offices.
Law or accounting, you mean?
Yeah, law, sorry, what did I say?
Law and engineering.
Yeah, sorry, law or accounting.
Okay.
And they worked in accounting offices or law offices as the office boy, but more than office boy, but as juniors, if you like. And they then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon they'd go and 4:30 they'd head up to 5 or 6 o'clock lectures. So the lectures at night. So I went and did some accounting lectures. I did Accounting 1, which I suppose is 101 these days, and another one called Secretarial Practice, which was just a little bit about what the secretary of the company has to do. And then another one was Commercial Law 1. That was also part of accounting. And the following year I did I did commercial law too, and so that took up, I think, a couple of evenings a week, and then I'd have 1 or 2 evenings doing the homework, and then I also, Dave Tierney, who you know, or you know of, in Sydney, he had been in the design office just the year before, and he had a job up in at the Polytech. And they once again had a night class, equivalent to Polytech students. They used to work during the day as cadets or engineers assistants or whatever, and then in the evening go and do night classes, and I did the night class for engineering structures.
So you actually taught it?
I taught it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
He had, this is really serving up the stuff we had done in our final year of the theory of engineering structures, and I could still remember enough to do that, and I think I did it all right. And
because you were later on, you were on a board of one in Polytechnic, is that right?
Oh yes, oh well, yes I was, yeah.
Was that
yes, the Institution of Engineers had a nominee on the board,
right?
And I knew somebody was coming off, and I said, if you want somebody to go on again, I'd be happy to do it. And I did it, thinking, and with the expectation I could have been there for 3 years and then maybe another 3 years or whatever. But I got fed up with it, all the politics of it, and so after a year I gave it away.
Okay.
But yeah, so I kept myself busy with my with those various things, and then in the weekends I'd try and play. I played hockey for a while, but
for university, was it?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was university or college old boys, but I only lasted about a game, I think, and I very strongly pulled a leg muscle, and so I went and saw the doctor, and he said, well, are you really going to get yourself fit? First of all, you'll have to rest up. Then, if you really get yourself fit, you can play again. But if you don't get yourself really fit, I'd advise you not to go and play again. So I thought, oh, to hell with it. So I did things like play badminton or whatever, not very well, I've got to tell you. But anyway, so that was my life then, except that I stayed at home with the folks for about a year, and then I moved into a flat in Hill Street, just behind Parliament Buildings.
Okay. Who are you now
with Bob Barge. He's the one I mentioned that I'd known in London, and had also met in Market Street in San Francisco when he was looking for me. And
sorry, Pete, I'll just stop for one moment. Sorry about that, Pete. Now, you were saying, Bob Barge had a flat in Hill Street?
That's right. Well, the first, so that's my first 2 years, and
No,
I was in a flat in Hill Street.
Yep.
For the second year of that.
Was it just you and Bob?
No, there was a couple of other fellows in there. There's a young English engineer and a fellow from the AMP, and Don Carroll in his name, but that, he's just of no significance. And it was very handy. I could, about 4 minutes walk to work. And in that couple of years, very soon after I got back, I got a Morris Minor car.
To help pull the ladies.
Oh, no.
Sorry, not help pull the ladies. So.
Yeah, that's right. The interesting thing about that is that you couldn't get a new car in New Zealand. I might have mentioned this before. I think I'd had one at Lake Hawea, but I got this one because I had some overseas funds. I had to prove to the Department of Industries and Commerce that the money I had in my bank in Canada, I had earned myself, and I had to go and have an interview and prove to them that I hadn't done it. I had put this money in the bank by winning it at the casino. I said, prove to us you earned it. If you earned it, you can use it to buy a car.
Far out, it was so
and
regimented, wasn't it?
yeah, and so I had to produce my bank book, and I said, you know, there is my money coming into the bank book every week or second week, and that's the money I was earning, and I was having my board paid by the firm I was working for, so that's why there's not much money coming out, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's what you had to do to get a car, or else wait 2 or 3 years, and even then they'd have wanted you to buy a couple of second-hand cars for them in the 2 or 3 years while you waited for a new one. So that was in the good old days, as they say, when New Zealand was a pretty closed economy. And anyway, so I had a Morris Minor car, and there were quite a number of engineers working in Wellington in the Ministry of Works. Then after my 2 years in the design office, I went for 2 years into, supposedly 2 years, but extend on a bit. I went to work out at Porirua, where the Ministry of Works had an office there, and I worked in 3 jobs in succession, and doing construction work from there, and they did quite a lot of their own construction work. The Johnsonville bypass, motorway that bypasses Johnsonville now, was within 6 months of being completed. The bridges were getting on, were virtually complete, and anyway, I went there, and I managed the team of people who finished the motorway at Johnsonville, the bypass there, and then I went on to build the Porirua Town Centre. Not I didn't build it, I was the manager of the job, and Porirua was just a big old stream flat that had been built out as the Porirua stream came down and built up its own flat where it ended the harbour, and we reclaimed quite a bit of land, built up the land, and straightened up the stream, and had some bridges built, and a whole lot of roads, and a whole lot of pipes, and water mains, and car parks, and roads, and one thing and another. And we had that built over a period of about 18 months, and and during that time, life carried on more or less as before, except that I shifted out of the Hill Street flat into a flat with Peter Macaulay in Hawker Street, which is if you go to Willer Street in Wellington and go to the top of Willer Street, take a left turn, and half a block along, then head up the hill again. That's Hawker Street. So it was
where Paul Dukes used to live.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there was we were very good. It was very good. There was a 4-bedroom house which we were renting because the owner was away overseas. He was in the foreign affairs. So that was excellent. It had a magnificent view right out over the harbour and all the sun, and very handy.
So was this the one where you had a few dinner parties, Pete?
Oh, well, not. It wasn't a sort of monthly event, but might occasionally. I think Mum tells the time when she came to a dinner party which I had to put on, or I did put on, and we cooked for ourselves, and like we all took turns, 4 of us. One was Monday, one Tuesday, one Wednesday, and so on, through Monday, Thursday, and
what was your specialty?
Oh, there was no specialty. There was either sausages or chops or steak or gurnard or whatever it was, and and it was about that time.
Excuse me for one moment. This is just distracting me a little bit. So as we sort out our studio here, this is dazzling me. So I shall put it down a little bit more. Okay, carry on this time.
Yeah. Okay. And so it was while I was working at Porirua, living at Hawker Street, and it was Christmas time, and we were heading a group of 6 of us, I think, or we're going to walk 5 of us, I think, walk the Milford track, and we went down. I think it was Christmas Day or the day after Christmas Day. We were going down in the boat to. In those days, most people who went to Christchurch went in the boat. There was a boat each way 6 nights a week. So you go down and get on the boat at 8 o'clock at night, and sleep. You get a cabin and so on, and have coffee and biscuits beforehand. Have bunks and cabins and so on, and get up in the morning at 7 o'clock, and you're in Littleton, and that's how we were going down south. And at the end of it must have been about 6 o'clock at night or so, and Bob Barge was one of the group of blokes going, and I took him to introduce him to a flat where there were a couple of girls, one of whom I was taking out, and a bloke were living. And
you were taking out as dating?
Well, whatever, yeah, whatever. Yes.
Yeah, were you just taking her on a couple of dates? It was all pretty low key, or had you been seeing each other for a while?
Oh, it was reasonably low key, yeah. And this place on Ballina Bay, is it?
The big blue building?
Opening up into Evans Bay,
yeah.
And that's where they were. And we called in, and there were 2 girls who also happened to be going on the same boat as we were, also going to walk the Milford track, were there, and one of them was Mum. And so we saw them very briefly and said, oh, well, we might see you on the boat. And so we got on the boat.
What did you think when you saw Mum then? Did you think, she was all right?
Well, you know, you always had your eye out.
Fair enough too.
Yeah. But you know, there's no didn't really see too much of them, and but was there was certain attraction there, but not. But that's all. It wasn't. It was just we just met them, and then when we were on the boat, we met them again, and I talked a bit to Mum. I found out that they were going on ahead of us. I think they would go straight on to do the Milford track, whereas we were going to have a few days in Wanaka, something like that. And then they were coming back and ending up picking apples in Nelson. So I saw enough of Mum at that time that I thought she was a very attractive person, and I made a point of finding out where some way of contacting her in Nelson, and so in fact, as a couple of months later, when I guess it might have been a month or so later, Bob Barge was working in Nelson at that stage, and I went down and had a weekend with Bob, which I made a point of catching up with Mum quite a bit. Anyway, so that was January.
And did you go out on a date in Nelson?
Oh well, yeah, we went.
Where'd you go for your first date?
Oh well, we didn't have. I mean, she was out at an apple farm with Kathy, a friend, living out there picking apples.
Kathy, do you know who?
Oh, I forget her name.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And lives in Melbourne now. And then we went out to see her, and I think we had the day. We went to Kaiteri Beach.
Okay.
And I hadn't been to Kaiteri Beach before, but it's a very nice beach, and well, you know about Kaiteri. And so
go for a swim?
Don't think so. I don't think it was
warm
enough. It was one of these days when you didn't feel like swimming, and then we went to might have been that night, went to a dance in Stoke.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and in those days there were lots of, most places in New Zealand, they're quite small places, very many of them would have a dance on in the local hall, because the pubs were closed at 6. There were no nightclubs or anything like that. Well, there might have been the very odd place, one or two in Auckland, Wellington, maybe one in Christchurch, sort of thing. But that's it. So all around New Zealand there were these. Invariably there was a dance on somewhere. So we went to the public dance at Stoke, and
Dance
anyway,
night away. You what sort of music did they have at the? What did they play in those days at the dance? Just a couple of songs. Can you remember any couple of songs?
Not really, no. If you turn on to the radio station here, I'll show you during the weekend. There's one here that plays a lot of the music that used to be around.
So this is a 1960 or so?
Well, this is 1960, 1961. Yeah.
So any Elvis Presley?
No,
or
1962 it was.
any Elvis Presley or
No.
Bill Haley, Rock Round the Clock?
Look, I can't tell you, Matt. I'm sorry.
You were too much engrossed on Mother.
No, don't put words in that. No.
I'm joking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I can't tell you, but I can tell you
Sure.
the sort of music
Glenn Miller?
maybe, but no big deal there.
But
There were usually the popular songs were things that came along in musicals, either musicals or musical movies or things like that.
I used to do.
Anyway, let's not make a big feature of that.
Sure. Okay.
And then Mum went back up to Auckland, and I think in February, and she she came. She would have already told you this, that she came down to Wellington to work, and she stayed in the flat on the terrace. And
She came down primarily to try things out with you guys?
I don't know. You have to ask her that.
Okay.
And I remember her coming down. She came down in those days. As I say, you didn't normally travel by plane. She came down by the bus. There was a bus. It was an unusual bus because it wasn't run by a state-owned company. Most things were run by the railways or something. This wasn't. Can't remember the name of it. But anyway, she came down and she had a flat on the terrace, and I was in the flat at Hawker Street and going through to Pararua every day to work. Most of the times I would take my car and
Maury Minor?
and take my car and park it at the railway station. You could get a park in those days in Thorndon and in Sydney Street or somewhere, and quite often I'd pick Mum up and first thing in the morning because she got a job at Taita.
Oh, okay. And in the hut, so she'd take her to the.
We
rail
both
station.
go to the station and so I saw her very regularly. I got pretty keen on her pretty soon, and
You went out just in terms of places you went. You could go to dances, movies.
yeah, we go to dances, we go to movies. Not that many dances, to be honest. There weren't that many places to go out to dinner. I'm trying to think of the name of a place where I took her out to dinner, and it just escapes me at the moment. But there weren't many good restaurants in Wellington then. And I remember Mum came out to Waikanae for Easter and stayed out at Waikanae where the folks were. And anyway, so that was 1962. met in December 61, and then we were married in August 62.
And where did you ask Mum to marry you?
It was it was halfway between Paraparaumu and Waikanai. Used to be a lookout. In fact, there still is, but it's been built around with houses. It used to look out over the sand dunes through to through to the sea and Kapiti Island, and that's where I asked her.
So if I between Paraparaumu and Waikanai, the lookout
On the left,
as you're driving north.
yes, and there's some very large houses on the
Okay.
right. It's just before the part of the where it's just beyond. It's about a half a kilometre beyond. Oh golly, what's that? There's a place that's been developed since for farm things, agricultural.
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the one.
So yeah,
Yeah, and so you got married in what month?
we got married in August. We got married on the day of the French test.
France, New Zealand.
Yeah. And
That's a rugby,
No, I think it was
rugby test, obviously.
yeah, August the
Rugby
25th.
union test.
August the 25th was a Saturday, and Mum, and because Mum was a school teacher, we got, I think it was probably the first Saturday of the August school holidays,
Right.
so we could, so she had a couple of weeks there, and
What was the wedding like? Was it
Oh.
a big, small? Was it formal, informal?
oh well, we had a church wedding at the Waikanai Church.
Did
Yeah.
you have to go along to be interviewed by the minister?
Oh yeah, well yes we did. He said he liked to have a talk. When we got there, he didn't have much to say really. We wondered why he'd even asked us. But the minister there was the minister from Otaki. He was a youngish bloke, and no big drama there. And we had a reception at the oh golly, there's a sort of restaurant, tea rooms just on the north side of the Waikanai Bridge, on the main road.
Oh yeah.
And the main fee, and I think we had, I think they could take 76 or something like that people. So that's
And did you have was it Peter McCauley as the best man?
yes,
And just one best man, and
Yes.
Mum's had one
yeah,
bridesmaid, and that was Margaret Buchanan, was it?
yeah, that's right.
Okay. And and there was no dancing at the wedding. It was just a sit down wedding. By the sounds
Yeah,
of
there
it.
was dinner. Yes, yeah.
Okay, often at that place. Oh, right.
Yeah.
And who gave speeches at the wedding?
Oh well, Peter McCauley would have, of course, and Grandpop would have, and I did, and I'll be honest with you, I can't remember. Somebody would have read out the telegrams. Peter McCauley did that as well. I don't know, and somebody would have toasted absent friends. Might have been Bill Teasdale, I'm not sure.
Did you have an MC at all?
Oh yes, I can't remember who that was either. It might have been, it might have been Bill Teasdale. I'm not sure. That's a very good friend of Dad's, his contemporary, who we knew as Uncle Bill, because we had no blood relations in New Zealand. Yes, it was a dinner, and
Who gave Mum away? Did she have someone give her away?
I think it was, yes, it was, I'm pretty sure it was her uncle.
Archie, was it?
No, Grace's, Grace's husband.
Jeff.
Yeah, Uncle Jeff. I'm pretty sure it was him. but I might be wrong. I just might be wrong.
That's
Oh,
right.
I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, sounds.
And our first house was, so this is August 64, and our first house was the A-framed house, a little A-framed house in Parramatta at
Just
Marleview Road.
before you go into your first house, I'll just. All right.
Okay, well, Matthew asked me what happened, where did we go for a honeymoon?
Yeah.
Well, we
Well, first of all, did you have a bucks night of any?
not of any significance.
Did you just go and have a couple of beers somewhere?
Yes, but I can't remember the details. It was pretty low
Must have
key.
been a big night.
Pretty low key sort of stuff. It was during this time that it was earlier in the year where we had to get out of the house in Whitmore Street, the 4-bedroom house with a great aspect and so on, because the owners were coming back. It was most unreasonable. So we had a house in a tie then but I think 2 or 3 weeks before we were due to get married, I'd shifted back home because it was convenient for somebody else to come in after me, and it was convenient for them to come in. So I was at home, and we had some drinks at this place in the Tailay, but it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't your type of bucks night. It was pretty low key sort of stuff.
Okay. And honeymoon.
Yeah, right. Well, we went down to Queenstown for our honeymoon. Went to skiing in Queenstown. Mum had done a reasonable amount of skiing in Canada, and in fact had been skiing up on Mount Ruapehu. So prior to that, not quite sure when, so we went down via Christchurch. We went down, took the car on the boat, and went down to Christchurch, and then drove from Christchurch through to Mount Cook. I hadn't been to Mount Cook, neither had Mum, so we went and had a day at Mount Cook, and we then drove to Queenstown, and that was a famous time which I mention every now and again, when as I was driving from Mount Cook through to the through to Terrace, on a pretty funny sort of road in those days. That the little red indicator light for the generator went on, and I said, "Oh, we got a bit of trouble." And Mum said, "Well, why are you worried? Just a little red light." So anyway, we went and got our generator fixed at Alexandra, and then we went up and had a day at Hawea, because that's where I'd worked, and it was it's an
Lovely spot, actually, isn't it?
interesting spot. It's no big deal in those days, quite an unsophisticated spot. But we had a day there, and then we had a little time at had some time at Queenstown, and unfortunately it was pretty unsophisticated there, comparatively speaking. The snowfields, the tows were rope tows, so you hang on to the rope, and took you up the rope tow line of the rope tow, and Mum found this pretty hard to deal with. She used to having chairlifts in Canada, so she had a few problems with it. But anyway, that's where we had our honeymoon.
Did you have your black skis then, Pete? Those ones you traded in for, at Mount Ruapehu for a collector's item? The old.
Yes, I think I probably did. Yes, they were Japanese made skis, I think. I don't think they were very good, but I wasn't a very good skier. I think it's more something to do with the skier, not the skis. Yeah.
Okay.
And Mum had reasonably good skis, but I can't remember, were they metal? METALL. Anyway, after the...
so you had how many days skiing did you have?
I can't remember. Mum was having a few problems, so we didn't do all that much skiing.
Right.
we had a few days in Wanaka, had some time at Mount Cook, a couple of days at Hawea, and unplanned stop at Alexandra for a day while we got our generator fixed, and then some time then. So, what was one thing another, we didn't have that long at Queenstown. But, no, it wasn't a crashing success in terms of skiing because of the problems.
Good weather though?
Oh, I think it was okay. I can't remember, Matt. I don't recall it being terrible. Overshadowing it mostly was the fact that difficulty in coping with the rope tow.
Sure. Okay.
And so that sort of puts a damper on the skiing, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. And then we came back, and our first house was in Parramatta, in Marnaview Road, a little A-framed house at the, down on the shores of the Parnui Inlet.
And you chose there because, that location, because were you working at Poirua at that stage? And
Yes.
Mum was in Linden, was it?
Well, she got a job in Linden because we were doing that. I just liked the look of Parramatta, and so we got a house to rent there. Houses were very difficult to find to rent. There's still, well, it's 15 years after World War. Well, it's more than that, it's going on for 20, isn't it? I think it's 16 or 17 years after World War II. But houses were still a little bit difficult. It was just in there, so so we quite liked the area, and there was this little house available, and so we took it, and it had a lovely position, but it was like a lot of Parramatta in those days. It didn't have proper sewage. You had a chemical toilet.
Oh, really?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay.
So that was my Saturday morning job, dig the hole in the right place, and he was only a civil engineer, but on Saturdays he led a hump and drum live. Anyway.
Okay, so an A-frame house.
And, in fact, it was just a few sections long. Soon after I came back from my travels, Grandpapa suggested why didn't I put some money down on a section and pay it off as a forced way of saving money, and a bit like there'd be some capital gain. And both those things happened to a degree. It was no bonanza. So, but just by chance it was somewhere near there.
Okay, and when did you sell that?
Oh, I sold it just, in fact, I think the year just a few months before I met Mum.
Okay.
Not one wasn't tied in with the other. And it was just at the same time, as it turned out, that the Poirua Residency, the Ministry of Works, was also looking after the construction of the motorway between Naranga and Kaiwara. And one manager was moving to another job, and I went and I was sent down there. So, having got myself a house in Poirua, in Parramatta, I was shifted from my Poirua job. Having travelled from Wellington to Poirua for a couple of years. Anyway, that's the way it was, so I was down there. So we're now getting into just into 1963, and during 1963 I worked on this job, and then Grandpop just retired from working for the Ministry of Works, and he kept saying wouldn't it be a good idea if I could go into business with him, so we would have as it were, a father and son business.
Okay.
And he was quite keen on this. I had some misgivings. I didn't quite know why I did, because I didn't quite know what would be involved. And Anyway, so in September I left the Ministry of Works, September '63, and went to work with Grandpop. And Grandpop was working out of his home in
Sort of
Kildare.
consulting.
He was there on his own right, just when I retired, not to the same level of expertise as he had, but I set up on my own account and just worked on whatever work was available. He thought this was a potential for more than just himself. It was a bit of a business because it's not that easy to get from Parramatta to Kandala, where his house was, unless you got a car. And if I took the car, well then Mum didn't have a car. So most of the time I took the train and I got the bus back up from Kaiwara to Kandala, or walked up the bridle track. There's a footpath up, so I did that some of the time. Anyway, it was so that was September, I think, but anyway, in October, Linley was born. So things sort of kept moving along, and after about 2 or 3 months, I didn't feel like things were getting anywhere. I felt I didn't feel right in this job that Grandpop, and working with him and his, and so we decided not to continue, and I got a job with Downers.
Okay, and basically with Grandpop, was it? I think you mentioned that basically you saw yourself as doing too much, was it donkey work, and
well, it's not that so much. He got work that was specific and particular to himself.
Yes.
And I couldn't see what there was for me to do. Nobody was coming along and say, Peter Turner, we want you to do this, that and the other thing for us, because you've done similar sorts of things in the past. And I couldn't see any things developing for me. And so, rightly or wrongly, I decided that it would be better if I tried to get another job.
Okay.
So I got a job with Downer in Wellington. And Mum has probably told you that it was a fairly, wasn't an easy 2 or 3 months anyway, because when she had Linley, she had an infection in the breast, and she ended up in an isolation ward because it was she had an H-bug.
What's an H-bug?
Oh, a very strong infection in the breast, so that she had to be isolated.
Okay.
And once it gets in it, so they worked on that. She was out for several weeks, or maybe a couple of months on that, and I was at home. In fact, I was out at Izard Road with Grandpop and Nana and with Linley. So we got by, and
Nana sort of looked after Linley.
yeah, and I did too, and yeah, and between the two of us, and so Mum, of course, was isolated in her little room there, and
did Gran come down for a bit?
I don't think that time, no. She did about a year later when Mum was sick.
Okay.
I think that's right. Anyway, back out we went to Parramatta, and so we're now getting in 1960, about 64, was it? Yeah, I think 64. So I was starting with Downers. Mum was back at Parramatta with the A-frame with Linley, and fairly early in the year, perhaps March, I'm not sure, we then moved over to a tiny little place in Seaview Road, 15 Seaview Road, one of the little patches halfway down the hill there,
Okay.
which was 40 square metres. It had a tiny kitchen, tiny living room, 2 tiny bedrooms, and a chemical toilet again. So, and so that I worked at Downers, and Lindley grew up. I was working in Downers doing.
So what was Lindley like? How was Lindley as a baby?
All you kids were good babies. What we did, I remember talking to Uncle David, and a thing I always tell people who have new babies, and him saying, look, they can demand feed for a little while, but as soon as possible, within a week or two, start feeding them, insisting you feed every 4 hours, and then then you have a break. So you go so between 10 and 6, 10 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning, there's an 8-hour break, and don't feed after 6 weeks. So that was quite good.
That was after 6 weeks or 2 weeks?
6 weeks.
Okay.
Gradually, after a couple of weeks, you start to try to get them onto to a rhythm. So that if the baby, suppose you fed the baby at 6, it starts demanding food at crying at 9:30. You don't pick them up until 10, and you feed them. And then if they start crying at 1:30 instead of 2, you let them cry and then pick them up at 2. So they get the rhythm. And then you feed them at 6 and 10, and then get to bed as soon as you can. And if they wake up at 2 in the morning, after about 6 weeks, if they wake up at 2 in the morning and cry, let them cry. And with both you kids, all you 3 kids, this worked very well. You only cried once or twice, might have gone in there and patted you or something like that, but not too much of that either. In other words, let them get into the rhythm. Anyway, so it was quite it was a funny little place, but it was okay. The only thing was, at the end of that year, towards the end, I'm not sure when it was, it might have been August, Mum had been having trouble, and she found out she had a bad infected kidney. She had great kidney pain. She had had them for about a year on and off. She'd go periods of very bad pain. And so she went into hospital, had a kidney removed. And I think that was the time when Gran came down and looked after Lindley.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's it.
Right, I remember.
Yeah. And Mum, I mean, it's quite a severe operation, but I remember the doctor saying to me, I said, now what was wrong with the kidney, He said, it wouldn't have won any prizes, that's all he would say, about the kidney. And rightly or wrongly, he said, there's lots of people with only one kidney, and you only need one. The body duplicates things, and the one kidney that's there develops to the point where it can do the work that would normally be shared. Anyway, touch wood. Yeah. So.
Mum hasn't had too many troubles with it since then, has she?
Oh no, she hasn't. No, every now and again there's as she calls it, she gets a wiggle, and I think both she and I don't say too much, except we sort of wonder in our own minds what's might be there or not there. So anyway, so far so good. So we continued. We were there for that year. I had my year with Downers. I was working in they had separated their business into several sorts of activities. One was earthworks, which speaks for earthworks and roading, and mining. That's big open cast mining, which is just major earthworks. The other was civil engineering, which deals with the anything that isn't earthworks. There's bridges and wharves and tunnels and one thing and another. Then another section that dealt with quarries and making of road gravel and concrete aggregates and so on. And so anyway, I worked in the earthworks there for a year.
What was you were just an engineering?
Well, I was
role?
called an executive engineer. There was a manager of the earthworks, and there were about the earthworks and mining, and so there were a lot of open cast mining going on, and in the Huntly near Hamilton, and also down in Ojai.
This is gold mines?
No, this is all open cast mining for coal.
Coal, that's right.
Yeah, so you dig down, say, 30, 40, 50 metres with big open cut mining, and underneath it there may be a 4 metre thickness of coal, which you then dig out and take out in trucks.
And did you guys just contract to
Yes.
mining company?
Oh, we contracted in those days to the mines department. They owned most of the coal mines.
So, for instance, you were just paid regardless of the price of coal.
Yes.
It was just you weren't actually mining.
We
Taking the risk on the price
no.
of the coal, etc.
Yeah.
They just said, "Will you bring out the coal?
Yeah.
And we'll pay you per tonne."
Yeah,
or
they owned the coal fields. They decided which coal fields they wanted to develop, which they could economically develop, and then they let the contract, and we got so much a cubic metre for the overburden and so much a tonne for the coal.
Okay.
And so anyway, I worked a year for that, and we some of the work we did was development of land subdivision in Wellington. We had some of those contracts, and I was a bit involved. That was pretty straightforward because I'd been doing it in the Ministry of Works, and I got involved in some estimating and so on. But what I found was that Downer and Company, I was very impressed with the people there. They were very good at their jobs. They knew what they were doing. You talk about when you're looking for top people, you want wisdom, knowing what they're doing, vision, be able to think up ways broadly, and you want wisdom, vision, judgment, so you can, with knowing how to do it and have these ideas, you can exercise proper judgment, and then the other one's integrity. And they had all these, and they were to a much greater degree than I'd seen in the Ministry of Works. Well, there were some very good engineers in the Ministry of Works, but if you get all those things together, I thought they were very good. And in fact, I quickly came to the conclusion that they were so damn good, and I felt quite inadequate in my knowledge compared with them. So I thought, oh well, I don't know that my future's here, but I'll continue. I'll stay here at least 2 years. I must give it a go. But after I'd been there about 9 months, then and Lindley, of course, was then getting on for about a year old. There was some jobs advertised with PA management, and who did management consulting to industry and commercial organisations in Australia and New Zealand, and they were expanding in New Zealand, or hoping to, getting more work, and they wanted to develop some New Zealand consultants, not just have Australians coming over. They wanted indigenous people. I think one of the reasons is because Australians didn't particularly want to come to New Zealand. I don't know, I think that's right. But anyway, suffice to say, I got the job, and
you had to sit some tests to...
Oh, well, yes, sort of. So I sat the same test that you sat. Whether they're exactly the same, probably not. There were ones which PA used, which one I remember was called Alpha 9, and I don't know why it was called Alpha 9, but it was. And you did a couple of tests, yeah. Okay. And as a result of which I got the job. And Mum was magnificent because she hadn't been that long out of having got over having a kidney removed, and I'm pretty sure it was September that I got offered this job, and I remember her making a nice meal for that occasion in our little wee place in Parramatta, and so the net result was that I resigned from Downers. I at that time I'd just been asked by Downers to. There was the tail race tunnel at Manapuri Power Station was out for tender, and that's an extremely large and difficult job, and down in all sorts of ways. And I'd been given the job of putting the tender together. And when I look back at it, I was only 32 at the time, and I felt a little bit inadequate, to say the least. But they said, "Oh, well, you've done a good job putting some other tenders together. Do this, and we'll." Our top people, divisional managers will work with you, and they did. And I remember on the day that I got told, I had also been told by Downers they wanted me to come to Australia for a couple of weeks to look at the Snowy Mountain schemes. So anyway, we did take the PA job, and we sold up our...
Just before we, Pete, I think we're running out of tape, so we'll just have a quick stop, and rather than risk